Hello and welcome. My name is Andre Dotson, and I'm a member of the Faculty Affairs team here at UAGC. I am the host of this session, Creating a Sense of Belonging in the Classroom through Liberation Pedagogy. By joining us today, you acknowledge that this session is being recorded and will be shared with TLC-related materials. Microphones will be muted for this presentation, but we encourage you to post questions and comments in the chat. Also, we've enabled live transcription. If you would like to use it, click the Show Captions button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Now, I am pleased to introduce to you Dr. Jorge Munoz. He is associate faculty here at UAGC and also at Cal State Los Angeles. Take it away, Jorge.
Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and share my screen so we can start right away, and then we'll answer some questions at the end. So let me begin by saying thank you very much for this opportunity, and let's dig in. So what does it mean to create a sense of belonging in the classroom through liberation pedagogy? Well, why liberation pedagogy in my classroom? For one, we want to look at the goal of student success. Liberation pedagogy, it emphasizes a humanistic approach, and we'll see how it does in a moment. Student success, especially in my classes, is achieved through respect, dialogue, and mutual learning, not only among students, but also with me as the instructor. So we have a dialogue going between the two of us. Similarly, we want to provide empowerment beyond the classroom. Here, students are liberated from traditional power structures, and it allows them to apply concepts that they learn in the classroom, but also take it to their communities and then share it with their friends, their families, and their communities overall. It also encourages students to view their education as a dialogue between equals, including myself, emphasizing their humanity in the learning process. Humanizing education is Paulo Freire's vision. He argued that education should empower students to name their particular world and see themselves as subjects, not only objects of learning. We're not teaching to the students, we're teaching with the students. And this particular approach grants students the freedom to understand and shape their identity within and beyond the classroom, especially when we're looking at it from the perspective of humanities. I teach philosophy, history, religion, and it's important to discuss these notions of identity and belonging, not just in the classroom, but also in society. Of course, that's going to require respect and an active pursuit of knowledge. For example, Freire and Falls-Borda emphasize that students should be treated with respect, and they should be supported in their education to become active participants. The students then will gain a self-awareness. This particular self-awareness of themselves within the classroom is then going to be taken out of the classroom and put into society. They recognize themselves as subjects of their own educational journey. And that's important because it allows them to know and understand and recognize who they are and why they are the students and why they are learning what they're learning. This requires a self-understanding. Right? Paulo Freire, for example, emphasizes respecting each person's humanity. They have to engage in a self-actualization. And we as instructors have to help them achieve this self-actualization. And this is the drive for autonomy and mutual respect that allows them to engage in a transformative learning. What we mean by transformative learning is that they will take this learning that they see as being given to them and then apply it to themselves and then apply it to their communities. It engages in creative and transformative actions, and they see themselves as becoming agents of the world around them. Again, not just objects of learning, but subjects of learning. And this is going to require a teacher-student dynamic in which the student is going to engage in a mutual learning process with each other, but also with the instructor, with me. They're going to teach me their lived experience as well. In my religion and identity class, as an example, we explore social constructs. We look at race, ethnicity, and religion, and we address societal norms and their impacts on students. The students then become aware of how their particular social norms shape their identity. What does it mean for them to be who they are? What does it mean for them to be female, for them to be male, for them to be heterosexual, etc.? And how does religion affect them? They also learn how the status quo imposes racial, ethnic, and religious expectations. This allows them to be empowered by becoming aware of the particular mores that affect them. They recognize then that they are agents of change. They can liberate themselves from societal mores that reinforce these minority majority power dynamics. Now, in order to do this, we need to build a dialogue, a communal dialogue. And for that, we have to create a safe and inclusive environment. How do we do this? Well, first of all, we engage in the students on an equal level, demonstrating an openness and vulnerability. For example, I share my story with my students. I'm going to present an authentic story of who I am to them, presenting them my subjectivity, fostering, of course, honesty and mutual respect from them, me to them, and from them to me. In doing so, I am allowing myself to be vulnerable, sharing my own personal stories through my own narrative of survival and cultural dedication. And that shows that I am willing to be vulnerable in the same way that I expect them to become vulnerable in their awareness of who they are. This particular approach then shows the student that they can have an authentic glimpse in their own identity and of their own identity and provide it to the classroom. And the classroom then is going to be a safe space for them to be able to engage in this dialogue. My projects, for example, are what I call History Pin or the eScene projects, and of course, classroom dialogues, where students are asked to promote and share personal stories, where I learn from them, and then of course, they learn from my stories, my narratives, and in many cases, we learn about each other's pains, about each other's successes, and about each other's true lived experience. And that is important because we're both engaging in a learning act, a reciprocal act of learning. We gain insight into each other's lives, and we foster critical consciousness. What do we mean by critical consciousness? It's necessarily a cultural awareness. We engage in dialogue, we participate in learning about different cultures and perspectives. I have a student, for example, who was born in Ethiopia. Her parents were born in Ethiopia. She was born here in the United States. And she discussed to the class, and she said, I feel that I live in a gray space. I feel that I'm not accepted because I'm of African descent. So I feel that African American students or African Americans in the United States do not accept me because I am African. And of course, America doesn't accept me because I'm Black. And to be able to be free to say those things and to discuss those things that are very personal is important in a safe space. This requires, of course, respecting each other's humanity, to be able to engage respectfully in communication. Thus, trust has to be part of the foundation from the beginning in the classroom. If you're going to build dialogue and encourage open communication and feel that the student feels valued and that their thoughts are accepted, you must create trust. You must trust the student to allow them to freedom to explore and develop their own answers. I tell them they can talk about anything they want in my class, but there's only one rule, and that rule is that they must respect one another. And to this day, that rule has never been broken. That doesn't mean that there isn't conflict, and we'll discuss that in a moment. But trust is multifaceted. We trust that the student will engage meaningfully in the project. and the students must trust that the project will promote awareness and not judgment. That is important, that the student feels free to be able to share this without being judged. This is their lived experience, after all. And this trust then allows the student to fully commit to the projects and enhances their self-awareness and their liberation. So the safe space, the classroom has to be a safe space for open dialogue. The student must feel that they can discuss anything they want, and each of them have to be able to understand each other's background and engage in this open discussion. This will take us to cooperative learning. Students will teach each other's worldviews and how that works. But that doesn't mean that there's not going to be conflict. In fact, conflict is going to be part of the dialogue. There are differences in viewpoints, beliefs, and they will create conflict. And they should be welcomed into this aspect of the dialogue. Liberation pedagogy prioritizes mutual respect, even when there is disagreement. You will engage in conflict when you discuss, for example, questions of race and racism and how does that make you feel. You will discuss, of course, how racism has affected people or how people feel that there's no racism. And you have to be able to engage in this discussion. Why do you feel this way? From what perspective are you looking at it? So conflict enables transformative thinking. Bell Hooks, for example, suggests that conflict encourages dialectical thinking and helps individuals grow beyond their own beliefs. More importantly, post-conflict reflection is really where learning is going to come from, because it allows the student to expand their perspectives. And this is important, especially when we come back into the dialogue together. This creates consciousness through awareness. They realize and they understand that they stand within societal power relations. They understand power imbalances. They also understand how other students see their world, and they see an advocacy against oppressive institutions. This leads to self-discovery. Students become aware that they are agents of change, that they can engage in change beyond the classroom, and of course to help each other in the classroom. Liberation pedagogy then sees that there has to be a changing of society for the better, and schools are the first point of contact where we as instructors can provide this freedom for students to be able to liberate themselves. That means then that the student is not going to be a passive learner. They are going to be encouraged to engage in the active participation of their own learning. This empowerment is going to then foster a commitment to social improvement and individual growth as a student in the classroom. And of course, it's going to go beyond. The students will explore their role in their community, because they see that they are part of a larger fabric, not just in my classroom, but beyond it. They realize that they belong to multiple groups, whether it be family, friends, social organizations, that they are being shaped and constantly shaped by different perspectives that surround them. And that leads us to the notion of intersectionality. Students then are going to gain an insight into how intersectional identities affects them, how I as an instructor must understand them, how I must listen to them, and realize that my perspective and their perspective can be different, but at the same time have common ground. We have to recognize the impact of various communities that foster self-awareness. What does it mean to be, for example, an African American woman versus a Latina versus a white woman from a wealthy background, or a white woman from a poor background? They all have different lived experiences. We must understand their differences, but also acknowledge that there are similarities. By recognizing that from each other, the students can feel that they are contributing to the dialogue in the classroom. So why liberation pedagogy? Because it encourages one, self-reflection. Students become active subjects in their learning, and they become enthused about learning. They don't lose the motivation to learn. And you move from a passive learner to an active engagement. And so students contribute to their own educational experience, to each other's educational experience, and I must add, to my educational experience. I always thank them at the end of the semester for having given me so much more to learn than what I started with. And I tell them that this has always been and will always be a dialectic in which we're both teaching each other and we are both respecting one another and respecting each other's contributions to our classroom and ultimately to our society. Thank you very much. I have some references that I can provide, and then I will, of course, answer any questions you may have. Let's see, there are some questions. Let me take a look.
Yeah, there's some comments in the chat.
Those were just my comments as you were going through. Those are just my comments that I was making as you were going through. Amazing, amazing information, amazing presentation. I will definitely take some of these strategies and use them in my classroom as well. So thank you so much for your expertise in this area.
I want to show you some examples of a project that we did since we have time. Let me share, let me go to, I had a student, for example, because we were talking about identity. Let me bring this up. Let's see, here we go. So here's an example. This is a student. Her name is Valerie Perloskaya, and she is of Russian descent. And one of the things she did in this project is she went back and she saw her identity as a byproduct of the Soviet Union. Her parents were a byproduct of the Soviet Union, and her grandparents and her parents told her a lot about who she was as having grown up, her parents and grandparents in the Soviet Union, but also being Jewish. And one of the reflections she engaged in was this particular question that she said, am I Jewish or am I Jew-ish? And she engaged in this very thorough discussion of how she perceived herself, how she perceived as herself as Jewish before she went to Israel for the first time, and how she perceived herself after she came back from Israel. And this is the type of project that I want, where they're looking at their identity and asking questions of who they are. I have another example just very quickly about this particular student, Victoria Maldonado. And because the project allows the student to create art as well. So for their creativity, you see the student here, a painting of herself, seeing herself in these different colors. And she said that she painted herself because she doesn't connect to a particular race. She only connects to a particular ethnicity, being Latina. And then she put a library here, and she discussed that to her, the library became a place to escape, to find stories of strong women who allowed her to create for herself a view of herself as a strong woman and as a protagonist in her life. And I feel that those are important things to look at and discuss because it allows for this notion of the student to belong and to tell her truth. And she actually discussed this in the class, telling, explaining the painting, explaining what it meant for her to be a Latina woman, and how important that was. And then I have another one that I just want to discuss very briefly, where a gentleman discussed that he was androsexual, and for the first time discussed it in public in the classroom, where he felt safe to, for the first time, say, "I am androsexual. I am," and he even explained it. I didn't even know this. He said an androsexual is a person who is attracted to a person who is masculine. And it doesn't matter whether the person is female or male, so long as they are masculine. And I thought that was fascinating. And he thanked me and the class for engaging in this discussion because they asked him questions. And so they were able to, he was able to engage in a thorough self-reflection of who he was. And he even discussed how he felt growing up, and how his family tried to change him, and he was happy the way he was. So it really felt that he had found a place where he belonged in the classroom and was free to say two things. One, that his life had been difficult because of his belief and of his um, um, I guess sexual orientation, if you can put it that way, or at least gender attraction. But at the same time, he felt that he could talk about this notion of conflict that he engaged in. And some people may have disagreed with him, others may have agreed with him, but they respected his perspective. And he felt respected in that they listened to him. And afterwards, he thanked me for giving him a forum to discuss these things in public. So to me, that is what a sense of belonging is in the classroom.
Very, very enlightening. Very enlightening. Thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Jorge, there is one question in the chat. It says, how do you handle students who may not be as willing to have healthy conversations?
Actually, that's a good question. I actually like to discuss their perspective. I want them to know, okay, tell me where you're coming from, why you're coming, and then engage in a dialogue. Um, for example, when the Israeli conflict and Palestinian conflict began, I had a Palestinian student who was very upset and very angry at what was going on, and I had another one who was Jewish, and they were both very angry in the classroom. And I said, you know what? Speak your experience. I know you are angry, and I know you're not going to agree with each other, and you're definitely not going to agree with me. But I want you to direct your anger to me. I am the lightning rod, and then I will communicate with you. And we did that, and we went back and forth throughout the semester until the end. We were able to understand, once we had allowed them to calm down and be able to discuss it, that we were both, they were both upset at what had happened, and that they both wanted some type of justice. And that is the conflict that I'm talking about. It is okay to have conflict. I also, you have to, I had a student, and let me finish with this very quickly, who also was having a difficulty with this notion of respect and things like that. So I asked him, please stay with me after class. Let's talk. And this was right after the Gulf War. And one of the things he told me when we discussed was that he was a veteran of the Gulf War, and he had come back, and he was not in the best frame of mind. And I said, hey, you know what? Tell me your story. And then once you tell me the story, I'll understand where you're coming from. And then I want you to go and tell your story to a counselor, especially here at the university, we have counselors who can help you. And then he would come and he would bring me pictures. He would, he would then find someone to talk to. And even if that's all you do, you're already helping in the dialogue. And at the end, he became one of my best students. So take the time to engage in that conflict. Don't be afraid of it, and engage and listen to your student, because there is something there that needs to be, contacted, something that needs to be somehow drawn out, and that is the most important thing. And so that's the best way to do it: to listen, and then to allow them to, put their experience, and then guide them to where you want them to go. And that is the most important part of it. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think that more than answered the question, but thank you so much. You are very thorough, very detailed. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
You enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you, Jorge, and thank you, audience, for participation in today's session. Please use the survey linked in the chat to nominate TLC presentations for conference awards and to share your feedback on this presentation.
Jorge, I took a lot of notes, so I want to use those in my Gen 101 class. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I
I
will
teach the
actually be.
students who come right on, they're the first class that they see when they come to us. And I get a lot of questions about how to, just handle stress management, time management based on their background, maybe based on their previous employment situation. And so I have to get really deep into the works with them to find out, what is it that is causing you to maybe, not turn your assignments in on time? Are you having some problems? And then they go deeper with me. So
Exactly. One of the things that I do use is that in my in-class classes, or in-person classes, every single day we start with a question of the day.
okay.
And they answer the question, but at the end, they have to provide a question that they would like answered. And then they do that. And then for the next 20 minutes, we engage in a discussion. How did this, and this is for my introduction to college class.
Yes.
So they ask questions like, well, why should I go to the Career Center? Or why should I take this class? Or why should I do this? Or
Right.
how can I have help in achieving these particular goals?
Mhm.
And then we discuss them. And then here's, I think, the other important part about the dialogue. When I give them their feedback, I actually answer every single one of those questions that they provide. So they're not just getting 10 points for good discussion. No, I answer that question in detail and then give them links every single time. And what I notice is the students engage and do the work because they know they're going to have an answer at the end.
Right.
And that's the fostering of the dialogue that I think is important in the classroom.
Mhm.
And in many cases, and I actually asked them for my class, I think it was, believe it or not, 90% first-time university students.
Right. Right.
So they have no guidance. So I
Yeah.
feel that I have to engage in that guidance, and that's important to me.
Yeah. I definitely say the same thing in my classroom. I try to make sure that I can offer that ear, I can offer that extra time if they need it, I can offer a Zoom session if they need it. And it does make a difference with some of my students because they can really gravitate towards a personal piece of me giving that, to them. So it's super important for me to just dive deeper into their lives and help in any way that I can. So
And you
I,
never know how you're going to influence their life. I mean,
yeah,
and remember, we can influence their lives positively or
right,
negatively. I
right,
mean, one bad professor and it can ruin everything.
everything. Yeah,
So I try to make sure that we have this, you know, formal but also informal dialogue,
yeah,
um, where I feel they can approach me, and I know I can be intimidating. I mean, I'm a big guy, and I can be intimidating, but at the
yeah,
same time, I do believe in care, caring
yeah,
for the student and showing that you care for the student, not just faking it.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
you
you're
know,
coming from your heart. So even if you're intimidating from the outside, they're feeling the inside. And I
mhm.
think that makes a difference with most students. You're coming from who you are as a person, and they can feel the difference between someone who's coming at them versus coming to them to get some information and not scolding them or not being condescending, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Is what I
I
try to
mean,
steer away from in my classroom.
yeah, I had this student who yesterday, she was on the verge of tears, and she told me her doggy is dying, you know.
Mm,
And I
mm,
told her, I understand. My
mm.
two doggies died a few years ago, and I cried like a baby. I'm not gonna lie. I cried like a baby.
Mhm.
My wife held the doggy, and I told her, just know that you gave her the best life you could, and that she will, transition to the next life or the next world, wherever she goes,
Right.
knowing that you gave her the best life. And then here's the instructor or the teacher in me, and I told her, and what's the best way that you can make her, feel proud of you? By succeeding this semester.
Wow.
Dedicate this semester to your doggy.
There you go.
And then afterwards, I mean, I was able to make her smile a little bit because
Yeah.
she felt relief. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
he doesn't hate me because I love my doggy so much. It's like, no, 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 you know.
Yeah. I mean, pets are part of the family, so
Oh
trust
yeah.
me. I've had many conversations with people I work with. If they lost their dog, they might need a day off
Yep.
because that's a horrible situation for them to try to figure out how to go forward with. So it's nothing wrong with having some kind of empathy for the loss of a pet. It's part
Yes.
of the family.
And just little things, listening to the students, to them, to us, what may be a little problem, to them is a big problem. You know,
Yes.
we have
Yeah.
lived more, we understand more, we have more things. So, again, engaging in this dialectic of learning and teaching between each other allows
Yeah.
us to understand their obstacles. I mean, they have obstacles.
Yep.
And you just have to listen to them. And then, I don't want to put it this way because it sounds, that you're coaching them, but at the same time, you do want to coach them. You want to be there on their side. You want to coach them and tell them, no matter how bad it is, fight for what you believe.
Yeah.
Go
Exactly.
forward. And actually, I gave them an entire lecture on grit, um,
Okay.
which I think is important because you may be very smart but not have grit, you
That's
know.
right. That's
And
right.
but if you
We
have
use
grit,
grit in one of our lesson plans for Gen 101 as well. And it's amazing how they don't understand the grit definition sometimes, and then they go back and they look at it, and then we ask them to give us a scenario of, of how you've ever showed grit in your life or in a job situation. And then it's like light bulb moment goes off. They didn't ever correlate grit with that particular act that they have
Mhm.
already done in their lives. So anyway, Jorge, I'm gonna give you your day back. I could sit here and talk to
I
you
know, I
like you
know.
can
Thank you very
tell
much, sir.
forever.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank
much.
you so much for taking a little bit of extra time. I'm a talkaholic, so I apologize.
No
But
problem.
thank you for your amazing presentation. And please, if you ever, need anything, please always reach out to us. We
Of course.
would love to
Thank you
have
very
you
much. I
again.
appreciate it.
All right, take
Have a
care.
good day. Thank you.
Bye, everybody, for who stayed around.
Thank you.